So why do you bring that army into your offices and subject management to having to deal with so many auditors? First and foremost, we've been engaged to perform the financial statement audit. That audit, or our responsibilities, are we perform the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, which come from the AICPA, as well as the Yellow Book from the U.S. GAO, or the Government Accountability Office. Those auditing standards don't relieve management of their responsibility. So when we come back in November, the financial statements that we will present will include our opinion, which is what we own, as well as the financial statements that are prepared by management. They're ultimately responsible for really three key things as it relates to the audit. One, that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Two, that they've established an effective framework of internal control over financial reporting. And three, compliance with laws and regulations, which is very similar to the conversations that you've received previous to this, that have a direct material effect upon the financial statements. Our audit does not alleviate management of those responsibilities, nor of this committee's as those deemed as those charged with governance, with their oversight responsibility of management. As a result of the audit, we also are in communication, as Larry said, with the State Auditor's Office, because they are considered to be the group auditor of the statewide CAFR, or the statewide Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which ultimately the financial statements of CalSTRS will be inputted into. So we have direct communication with them related to our audit plan, our assessment of materiality, as well as any findings that we might have would be reported to them as well. Ultimately, we will opine upon the CalSTRS financial statements and the supplementary information. The accounting or the auditing standards allow us to reach what we would deem to be an unmodified opinion, a modified opinion, or a disclaimer of an opinion. Historically, CalSTRS has received an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide, and we will be building our audit plan to achieve that in all likelihood again. We also perform certain specified procedures related to the required supplementary information that is included within the financial statements as well. As a subset, really, of the audit, we also issue two other kind of sets of reports and opinions upon those reports that management prepares. Embedded within the financial statements of CalSTRS, obviously, is the net or the assets available to pay the pension liability, and embedded within the footnotes are the total pension liability based upon the actuarial valuation. It's not a net number within your own financial statements, but that net number is ultimately allocated to the state of California, as well as a variety of, or all of your contributing entities, or the school districts. So this other pension information really is to take the information that's embedded within your financial statements, which would be that second row, the net pension liability, the deferred inflows and outflows of resources, and really try to understand how those school districts or the state of California can allocate their proportionate share of that liability. So that's some of the significant test work that Jen was referring to, that Ron Gasink leads. We perform a series of test procedures across close to 100 school districts at any given year, and that's really designed to allow us to opine upon the schedule as a whole of that proportionate share. Similarly to this report, management also issues what they call other post-employment benefits information, or the Medicare Premium Payment Program. This came out with the establishment of GASB 74 and 75 2 years ago. It's a much smaller program than the STRIP or the CalSTRS, but this is where management is scheduling the proportionate share of the total liability that is not funded related to the Medicare Premium Payment Program.
So to summarize our deliverables here, as Kevin mentioned, we will have 3 audit opinions or audit reports to deliver to you at the conclusion of our audit procedures that we'll present to you in November, focus on the financial statements, the other pension information, and the other post-employment benefit information. We'll also come back in November and meet with you and go through our other required communications to those charged with governance. There are some prescribed areas that we need to discuss with you in your role, and so we'll walk through those communications with you. We do issue an audit report on the internal controls over financial reporting under government auditing standards, so we'll present that to you at that time as well. And then should we have any findings or recommendations through the course of our audit work, that will be presented to you. And those can be in varying levels of severity, if you will, being either at the highest level a material weakness or significant deficiency, or what we would determine to be more of a just a deficiency. So if we were to have those, we would present that to you as well.
So if you look at our audit timeline, it spans more than a year. And this really is a year-round audit for us, and it's due to the size and sophistication of CalSTRS and the organization. If you look, we started planning for this year's audit before we had actually presented the results of last year's audit to you. A lot of that planning is because the census data is a year in arrears that's used for some of the information in the financial statements. And so those specific procedures that we perform on your contributing entities related to that census data, we can start in that time frame. And it also lets us work with your contributing entities to make sure that we are making the least impact in their daily operations as we work through our audit. January through March is where we really start doing our strategic risk analysis related to the financial statements. We meet with executives, we meet with members of the ARM committee, and we also do a lot of the planning for the timing and logistics of the audit. As you can imagine, we have a huge team. It's a huge organization. There's a lot that goes into the logistics to make everything flow and work together. We move on to the execution. The IT team has already been on site doing walkthroughs. So we've already started some of our interim procedures. And then we've also started requesting information to prepare for when the rest of the team is out here for field work. Our interim field work, we will be on site mid-May through mid-June. And for year-end, we will be on site mid-August through the end of September. That brings us to the report issuance. And our goal is to be into a position to issue the audit opinion at the end of September. And finally, the most important part is when we come back in November and we present the results of the audit to you. Now I want to talk a little bit about our audit approach, and it all really starts with a mindset, and that's acting with professional skepticism, independence, and objectivity. And you kind of wonder, what does that actually mean? What it means is we get to take our knowledge of the system and use that knowledge to design a better audit. But at the end, we have to kind of put that on the back burner and make sure that each year of the audit stands on its own. And the way we do that is we make sure everybody proves everything out year over year. And that moves through the audit phases. And they kind of coincide with the timeline that we just looked at. And during all the phases of the audit, we're always doing a continuous risk assessment. And that means we're evaluating all the information that we obtain in the audit about have we mitigated those risks, what are the strategic risks that potentially apply to misstatements in the financial statements. How we do that is we watch all your board meetings, we monitor the investment market, what it's doing, we keep an eye on the California state government, and we try and find out everything we can about what's going on within the system itself. A lot of that's done by speaking with both the ARM committee members, CalSTRS executives, and CalSTRS employees. Then we move on to the design and operating effectiveness of internal controls. First, we have to evaluate the design of the internal controls. So we kind of start fresh and we say, okay, we know what you told us you did last year, but tell us again what you're doing this year. And we evaluate whether it's designed effectively. And that really means, does the control do what they say it would do if it's working, if it's operating? And once we come to the conclusion that the control is designed effectively, then we make them prove it to us that it's operating. We want evidence that it is actually occurring. And then at that point, we can evaluate the residual risks that we have. And we apply our materiality and sampling methodology and perform substantive testing over all the significant audit areas. At the end of that, we accumulate all the results of the audit, we evaluate them, and hopefully come up with an unmodified opinion, as we have in the past.
Okay. The audit standards actually require that we discuss certain matters with you as we're working through the planning process for our audit. Our audit is not designed to identify fraud. We're not specifically looking for it, if you will. But should we come across any concerns about fraud within senior management, we would be communicating that to the committee in your role as those charged with governance. And we would do so as soon as that's identified. It wouldn't be something that we would wait until the November meeting to communicate to you. We've walked through today our audit strategy and our timing for the audit. Certainly any deviations from that will be brought to the committee's attention. Our audit approach is really a risk-based approach focused on risks of material misstatement, and that's really looking at both opportunities for fraud and opportunities for error. Part of assessing those risks of material misstatement is understanding the internal controls that are in place, not only at the transaction cycle level, but also over the financial reporting. And so we do spend quite a bit of time understanding the way that information comes to be, is reconciled, summarized, and also looking at the completeness and accuracy of the disclosures within those financial statements. We do take a look at the results of internal audit. We actively, look at those reports as they're being issued, really with the mindset of trying to identify if there are additional areas of risk for us to consider in our audit procedures, and if perhaps some of our audit procedures should be modified or changed in response to those risks. As Tim mentioned, meeting with members of the ARM committee and understanding your views and areas of concern is helpful to us in developing our audit plan and understanding the risks as you see them. We do calculate materiality based on both qualitative and quantitative factors, and that's applied at varying levels throughout the performance of our audit procedures. And normally today, we would have brought to the committee's attention any new material accounting standards that were set to be adopted by the system for the current fiscal year, but it's actually a bit of a quiet year from an accounting standard perspective, so knock on wood. But we would just add that management is very proactive in identifying upcoming accounting pronouncements and works through a process of basically drafting position papers, if you will, and working through the implementation of those on a fairly proactive basis.
So we wanted to identify for you some of the key considerations for the audit for the year ended June 30th, 2019. Always a key area of focus is really the existence and the valuation of the investments and derivative instruments. It's something we focus on every single year, and to Tim's point, we have to take a fresh perspective each year, and even if we haven't found issues in the investment portfolio in the past, we can't rely on that past evidence in terms of conducting the current year audit. In addition to that, Kevin mentioned, especially as it relates to what's disclosed in CalSTRS financial statements as well as the additional engagements, the liabilities, the total pension liability and the other post-employment liability. There are significant assumptions that are used to derive those liabilities. So in addition to testing the underlying inputs in terms of census data, we also take a fresh perspective and look at those assumptions that are determined by management. You use some external specialists to support you in that, and we do the same as a part of our audit engagement. One new item that popped up this year is the resignation of Andrew Roth. So that's going to unfortunately occur here, I think, in the next couple of days. I think Andrew has played a very important role within the organization. He is deeply embedded with the implementation of the new pension solution. And so we really evaluate that from the perspective of shifting roles and responsibilities. If you're going to have individuals that are going to be performing in different control functions within the organization, it can present an element of risk. And so that is something that we need to consider and something that wasn't necessarily anticipated. And then as it relates to the new pension administration system that is currently under implementation, the item that does impact the audit that we've talked about in the past is really resource fatigue. So if you think about it, under the current internal control structure, it's very important that when you think about all of the systems that are deriving the financial information in the financial statements as well as in the disclosures, that all of those controls are operating effectively. But there's an awful lot of attention focused on the implementation of the new pension solution. And so you're asking your resources and members of management to do quite a bit. And sometimes you get fatigue and sometimes some things can happen. So that's also an element of risk. We also want to make sure a couple of items are well understood that are not in scope, because I think you've talked about them during these board meetings and will continue to talk about them. So the new pension administration system is being implemented, but it is not deriving any financial information that will be included in the current year financial statements. So is not in scope within our audit. We're not performing any audit procedures relative to that system implementation today. So it's very important for you to know. No responsibility relative to that. And then in addition to that, when you think about the new building and the related financing, that's not currently in scope either, and it's probably not expected to be material in future years as well. So with that, Madam Chair, if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer those, or Dr. Gutman, if you have any comments or questions as well.
I don't have any questions from the committee right now. Anything from you, Dr. Gutman?
Yeah, so just real quick. So thank you for that presentation. So I'm looking at the committee and I see a lot of new faces.
I'm just visiting.
Yeah, well, Ms. Young, you're not new. So I am, as your expert, part of my job is to interact with these external auditors on your behalf and communicate, of course, directly with the chairperson if anything comes up. But in amongst that, one thing I wanted to do is to share some thoughts about the auditors, because they're new, right? They're new to you, and this is your first year with them. So Crow recently, it seems recent to me, although time goes by the older I get, maybe it's been a few years now, was awarded a contract to continue as our auditor, and this is a multi-year contract. It went on for a number of years, although really the right way to look at it is as a series of one-year contracts. You're not bound to any of those length of that contract beyond that audit year, and in fact, actually not even that audit year itself. So there's great flexibility within that contract. Nonetheless, there is the spirit of, well, if things are going well on both ends, then when you know who your auditor is going to be next year. So I think it was wisely done in that way. Crow competed for and won that contract. And one of the reasons they did is, I don't know if you noticed the staffing. The staffing tends to be, I would call this a very heavily staffed off audit from the top, at least in my experience as an auditor. And you see a lot of partners, and what that means is a lot of expense from the company. And so, but from your point of view, what it means is you get a lot of experience brought to the audit. So you have not only Brenda as assigning partners, Brenda been involved with some large pensions for many years throughout her career. She's playing a leadership role, in fact, within Crow. And then Kevin is the national partner, or certainly, well, yeah, you are the national partner with respect to these types of deals. So he's their guy. And then with respect to valuation, the guy who's known as Chris here. Chris, yeah, all right, smiley guy. I like Chris a lot. Chris is their valuation expert. So and he's a partner. So the partner number 3, right? And Chris's job is to help you understand the value of assets that it's really hard to understand the value of. So category 1, 2, 3, there's different categories of assets. Some are easy to value, like a stock. Some are very difficult, like a real estate portfolio. And then there are others, private equity, that are even more difficult. And his skill is in helping put a value on these inherently hard to value assets. And again, it's a partner level. And then you've got Craig, which is the IT, yet another partner, so partner number 4. So IT is important, especially in an organization like this. So Craig brings that skill backed up by yet us, a senior manager? Yes. Yeah, senior manager. Again, that senior manager is almost partner. So it's a very heavily staffed audit. And then the in charge is, you're basically the in charge, but you're a manager. Yeah, so you're in charge as a manager. In charge is usually a senior, not a manager. I was in charge when I was a senior. Didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. And so that was one of the reasons that Crow, at least in my opinion, one of the reasons that Crow was supported by the board is that they brought a wealth of experience. It's not just a local team. There happens to be some local talent. By local, I mean this Northern California area. But Crow actually brings their talent from across the country. Kevin's, I think, in Dallas or something like that, yeah. So they just bring the talent where they need to find it to come to the audit to work for you. So I think that's probably one of the things that did it. The second thing is, it's a really courageous audit team in the sense that, you know, one thing an auditor always has to be concerned about is independence and objectivity. And is that influenced at all? So look, if I make you happy, will you hire me again, right? Because I want to come back and do the job next year. What do I do to make you happy? Well, Crow has shown a penchant to not really care whether they're making you happy or not, but just to say, here's the audit, and here's what we found, and these are the findings, whether you like them or not, these are what we found. So it's a fairly courageous audit team. And from my point of view as your expert, that's gold to me. That's solid gold. So from my point of view, it's a pretty solid audit team that they bring back year after year. There's also a lot of stability. You don't see a lot of rotation in the staff, which, look, staff are going to rotate, right? People come, people quit, people retire, people move on, things happen. Nonetheless, they've done, I think, an amazing job over the years to have a fair amount of stability in the audit team, because nothing counts as much as experience, right, from year after year. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you providing that background, since we do have a number of new committee members, and I know we'll get to it when we look at the draft agenda later in the meeting, but I think at our next meeting, we're going to have an education item, just kind of providing some background on the committee and its oversight roles. I think that'll also be helpful to new committee members. I've got a question from Nora.
Can you just help me better understand on the items that are not in the scope, right? The two items, the new building and the new pension administration. How do we, where does that fit into the bigger sort of discussion, ensuring that it's?
Well, so put yourself in the auditor's shoes. Currently, the financial information that the auditors are using will come from what I'll refer to as a legacy system, or the system prior to the pension administration. So they have to audit the information they're given. They can't audit what information might be given to them in the year ahead. So they have to work with the factual framework that they're given. So they can't look ahead to a system that hasn't given them information yet and draw any opinion on what it might look like when it does give them information. Now, when pension administration does start cranking out financial information, which we all hope is soon, probably by next year, then that's when they'll look at it. Okay. But that's okay, because that's when it starts, right? So we're good there. The new building is very exciting for lots of reasons, and it draws lots of attention because of the excitement surrounded by a new building goes up in the ground, and hey, I can see it. But from an auditor's perspective, with respect to materiality of the fund as a whole, she chose not expected to be financially significant. Another word that one could use could say it would be immaterial to the financial statements taken as a whole. And so although maybe the optics of it are large, it really is rather small compared to other issues. And also it's building, it's dirt and it's concrete, and so it tends to be less risky than some of the other items.
The way it's going to be financed is different?
It's not related to how it's financed. Okay. It's more related to the scope, or just the raw dollar amount and the materiality to the financial statements taken as a whole. So when the auditor's making choice of what to go for and what to audit, they're going to pick the big fish. They're going to pick the riskiest things, the largest things, and sometimes those things that seem most interesting or exciting or lightning rods of attention really are rather small in that scope. Thank you for
that. Appreciate that. Thank you for the work.
I think, though, that's a really good question. I had the same question, but I think that there are other mechanisms that Lisa and that the management team is looking at to do sort of third-party oversight and tracking of our activity on the building and the budget and financing.
Yeah, and even an audit done internally.
Got it. Okay. So I think we'll get at it other ways. Yeah. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Look forward to working with you and seeing you in November. Okay, so we've got agenda item number 7. It's our 2018 internal audit plan results. Please.
This next item is the sharing with the committee the results of our 2018 calendar internal audit plan. And here today with me is Cheryl Dietz, immediately to my left. She's our supervising management auditor over our internal audit activities, and Mike Dutel, who is our in charge of our employer audit activities. And they will share with you some of the highlights of the agenda item and accomplishments for this past year.
Thank you, Larry. I'd like to give credit to the employer audit team. They worked together as a team and they exceeded our annual goal of 75 audits, and they actually completed 80 school district audits. These districts employed over 56,000 members, which is about 8% of CalSTR's total membership. 15 of these audits were limited scope desk audits that focused on one-time payments. 13 of the limited scope audits had a systemic finding, and the 2 other audits were no finding audits. Overall, we completed 67 audits that had a total of 178 findings, and 13 audits were no finding audits. Misreported earnings, such as one-time payments and extra duty earnings, was found in nearly 75% of our audits. Comparing this year's common finding results to prior years, we found that the percentage of misreported earnings went up, while the percentage of post-retirement earnings and unused sick leave findings went down. This outcome was expected because we did do 15 limited scope audits that did not report, or we did not look at unused sick leave or post-retirement earnings, because those audits specifically focused on one-time payments. 52 of the 80 audits had at least one systemic finding, which was 65% of our employers that were audited. The cause of a systemic finding is normally due to how a payment is coded in the employer's payroll system. Because of that, the impact of the finding is not limited to the sample members that we look at. Instead, the systemic finding will apply to all other members that received a misreported payment. As of February 1st, 23 employers with systemic findings identified nearly 6,200 additional members affected by systemic findings. What makes this number so impressive is that for the 23 employers that we looked at, we only sampled 194 members. As for the resolution status for employer audit findings during the year, 134 findings were resolved and 103 findings were in progress as of December 31st. For this calendar year, 2019, we plan to complete 84 audits. 50 will be limited scope audits that focus on either special compensation or unused sick leave, and 34 audits will be full scope audits. To date, we completed 7 full scope audits plus 8 limited scope audits for a total of 15 audits. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. We don't have any questions right now. I'm Cheryl.
Okay, so internal audits completed its 2018 calendar year plan except for the audit of Business Direct. This is currently being performed by Grant Thornton. So just to give you a little bit of background, internal audits completes audits of the CalSTR's internal operations, except for some of those areas that require specialty knowledge and expertise, such as investments in information technology. For those areas that require this expertise, we will contract out with an audit firm to assist us. Therefore, in this case, with the Business Direct audit is our financial accounting system, we contracted out with Grant Thornton to perform an evaluation of IT system access and controls. For this reporting period, we completed 5 audits and completed facilitation of 2 external audits. I'm just going to highlight a few. Enterprise risk management, this is a fairly new program, and it's the first time that has been audited. And I can provide the assurance that we did not identify any substantial issues in regards to enterprise risks, but rather opportunities to mature the program. We also evaluated the controls over pension solution budget. And I have to say that the oversight over the budget for pension solution is robust. We just identified a few opportunities to enhance documentation and maybe enhance monitoring over budget to actual. We also completed our 2 internal controls over member data audits, which had to do with service retirement benefits and employer reporting. Those controls were adequately designed and operating effectively. We just identified a few recommendations for employer reporting that had to do with, again, improving documentation, strengthening some policy language, and ensuring consistency and making demographic changes. As I mentioned, we contracted out for 2 investment audits, and those audits were a currency management program, which was performed by KPMG. We have representatives today in the audience representing KPMG, which is Mark Woodkey, partner, Sophia Vuzianis, manager, and Jury Adriano, manager.
Thank you.
Also, Macias, Jenny, and O'Connell performed a corporate governance investment audit, and representing MGO is Leah Cochran, manager. So the results of both these audits were positive. Controls were operating effectively. They just identified a few recommendations to enhance existing processes and procedures. Actually, I wanted to make sure you're aware of that for the currency management recommendations that was just issued, those investment office already implemented those recommendations. The full summaries of the audits performed in this reporting period are in ARM 49 to 59. We also followed up on 81 findings, and I'm happy to say that management resolved over half of those within the last 6 months. Those that are open, they have substantial progress has been made to full resolution. I do want to recall, I don't know many of you knew, but in November 2018, we also performed an audit of CalSTR's master custodian, State Street Bank. And KPMG performed that work, identified 6 issues. And I wanted to let you know that was just in November. And since that time, the investment office and State Street Bank has been working diligently to resolve those issues. And as of today, 3 of the 6 issues have been validated as resolved. And KPMG is still working to validate the remaining issues. So I feel like State Street has been very aggressive and working with our investment office to ensure resolution. In closing, the 2019 plan, we're well underway and we have 6 audits in progress. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
So just one quick question on the State Street matter, Cheryl, that you just raised. You know, it sounds like we've made good progress clearing through 3 of the 6 areas, and you sound confident that we're making good progress working on the others, even if they're not complete or validated yet.
Yes, so I think we're just really in the process of validating a few of them, and one that wasn't due quite yet, but they're well on target to complete this.
Good, okay, thank you.
In addition to that, they're working real closely with our investment area, and so they've really made some good progress.
Good,
Yep.
okay. So I don't have any questions here. Dr. Getman, any comments?
Yep, super quick. So, Mike, Cheryl, thanks. You guys are the point of the spear, right? You're down there getting it done. Appreciate the work of you both very much, and your teams as well. Mike, how many limited scopes you going to do next year? You did 15?
We did 15 last year, and this year we're going to do 50.
That's what I thought I heard you say, 50. Yeah, you know I love those. Yeah, so keep on keeping on. Thank you. That's it.
Great, thank you. Okay, no other questions on that one. So now I think Larry will move to your Chief Auditor update.
Well, as you can see, we've had a lot going on, and we have a lot underway. And so I just want to report that, you know, one of our internal initiatives is to continue to develop our internal staff, and we really are focusing on that, and it's been very beneficial for us as an organization. But we've had 2 staff recently, Brian Carlson and Leah, who have passed their certified internal auditor exam and became certified. And it's very prestigious within our profession, and I want to congratulate them on that effort, and adds a lot of credibility to the work that they perform as well. And so they've done a great job there.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Larry? Or, you're done, okay. So is there a compliance director update? Or?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Very brief in the interest of time. I wanted to just introduce new staff, please. We have 2 new staff that we've hired since January. We have Allison Lyman, she's the unit supervisor. Allison,
Welcome.
and Raksha Singh, she's our program analyst.
Great, welcome.
And both Allison and Raksha are registered to attend the SCCE conference next month, and they hope to successfully complete their certification at the end of the conference. Just wanted to say this has been an interesting 18-month journey, compliance journey, as Maurice said. We've made significant progress in building our program framework, and we look forward to the next steps, which will be implementing the plan that we presented earlier. That's all I have.
Thank you for everything that you've done. I'm looking forward to getting to see your staff and seeing what more progress we make next.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 10, review of information requests.
I have no information requests.
Okay, great. Larry, the draft agenda for the next committee meeting? You're having too much fun.
Yes, so our draft agenda for this next is before you for the next committee meeting in May, and that we'll work on the committee work plan as well as education opportunity and then provide you with a brief update of our progress.
Okay, great. Any questions on the agenda? Next one. Okay, opportunity for statements from the public. Okay, well, seeing none, I think we now get to go recognize the person who might be a risk to our organization because he's leaving. Thank you very much. The committee's adjourned.
Thank you. Tomorrow morning, Dana wanted to start out just to close off the board meeting. She had a couple announcements, so probably just 5 or 10 minutes of board stuff before we begin investments. At 9 o'clock, you're 9 o'clock, aren't you? Yeah.